Okay. Good morning and welcome to this public meeting of the Standing Committee on Social Development. My name is Jane Wayalin Armstrong and I am the MLA for Mofi Klitschou Region and Chair of the Standing Committee on Social Development. I will now ask members in the room to introduce themselves for the record, starting with Mr. Tester.
Kieran Tester, member for Range Lake.
Good morning, Danny McNeely, Satu Region.
Good morning, George Nearsu, MLA for the Mackenzie Delta.
Good morning, I'm Shauna Morgan, MLA for Yellowknife North.
Good morning, I'm Cheryl Yakalaya, member for the Decho.
Mr. Hawkins? Yeah.
Good morning, I'm Robert Hawkins, MLA for Yellowknife Center, and I'm happy to be here. Thanks very much.
Thank you, members. Today we will receive a briefing on housing as a human right from Inuit Right to Housing researchers, Lisa Alikamik and Janine Harvey. This briefing is part of this committee studies on how NWT legislation and policies can incorporate housing as a human right. Please note, this meeting is being live streamed to the Assembly social media channels. I would like to remind all members and witnesses to direct all questions and comments to myself as chair and to wait to be recognized before speaking to help us have a smooth meeting. Thank you. I will now pass this over to our presenters. Please introduce yourselves and proceed with your presentation. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you first and foremost for having me here. My colleague is not here at the moment. I'm hoping that she will pop in when she's able to. I'm from Ulukhaktok, Lisa Alikamik. I'm now residing here in Fort Simpson, Northwest Territories. The first picture that you see here is an aerial view of the community we call home, Ulukhaktok, formerly known as Holman Island. The presentation that I am going to share with you that my friend Janine and I worked together on last year, late couple years ago and last year, and we titled it Behind the Stark Truth. And this presentation is focused on hearing from local people with lived experience with housing in the NWT. And so here's a bit about us. Janine Harvey, she's a Ulukhaktok leader from Ulukhaktok. She's passionate about her culture and she's a strong believer in decolonizing the work she and other Inuit to do and help them be better. Janine is the executive director of the Dahiuktid Women's Society, which is a nonprofit organization with a vision to establish a shelter in a community for Inuit women and children who need access to safe housing and alternative housing where Inuit can practice their cultural rights. Janine is also a seamstress, and she hunts and harvests, and she's very active on her land and very close to her culture with her husband, her children, and her grandchildren. A little bit about me. I too am an Inuk artist and leader from Ulukhaktok. My art connects me to my culture, my identity, and where I find sharing that passion with classrooms in local communities and community functions as well. I'm a mother of 3 wonderful children. I also too participated in the development of the Dahiuktid Women's Society, and I served as their first president before I took on the role as the project manager for shelter operations. I too have a very strong connection to my land and my culture and my people. That's a little brief summary of who Janine and myself are. Here's another picture of Ulukhaktok, a little bit of a background of the work that we did with the Stark Truth. So over that year, Janine and I were 2 right to housing advocates. We traveled across the NWT to conduct culturally appropriate interviews with Indigenous community members, where we gathered stories and firsthand experiences of what it's like trying to find affordable, safe, secure housing in the North. And that is where we really connected with, people with lived experience. And our aim was to hear it firsthand from them. And that is where our grounding comes from. It's from our people with lived experience. So we were very interested in leading this project and doing these interviews because we see homelessness in our communities and our surrounding communities like on a daily basis. It was very evident and common, and homelessness is a real issue, as we all know. We conducted approximately 60 surveys and interviews about people's housing experiences in 3 communities. We traveled to Yellowknife, to Inuvik, and of course in Ulukwaktok, our home community. The surveys were written in plain English text with the aim of providing respondents with a clear understanding of the questions they were being asked and why. People were also given the option to complete surveys and interviews over their phone, over Facebook, over Messenger, or in person, really creating that opportunity to feel comfortable for them sharing their experiences when it comes to housing in the NWT. Here is a picture of one of our functions we did in the evenings. It was a very, very wonderful evening. I remember it so well. And we had a really good turnout. We held in-person community meetings and town halls in all 3 communities, which included culturally appropriate elements like sewing spaces. And these included activities that are a significant part of communities' everyday life, and cultural practices made the space more comforting. These activities created an environment that felt like less of an office space where they were going to be interrogated. Some questions were pretty hard for others to express, so creating that safe space was really vital in conducting these interviews. We created that familiar community setting where people could gather and they could connect and they can share with one another. And this informal and safe environment eased the tension and really encouraged community members to open up and engage in deeper conversations and more meaningful, and really open that door to be safe and feel safe to share these feelings otherwise that they would feel very uncomfortable sharing. So that was vital in our research, creating that safe space for members to share with us. Over time, we have years of trust. We found it very vital that we highlighted that area of creating that trust, that we are 2 members of lived experience. There was relationship building, some shared understanding, connections were at the foundation of what made community members receptive to our efforts and made the work very meaningful. It was also important to approach these housing conversations with extreme sensitivity, absolute confidentiality, patience, sincerity, and most certainly respect. Those were some highlighted areas we really wanted to implement in conducting our research. Although it was very important to us to know more about each other to build these connections, we didn't formally collect any identifying information from people who were interviewed. So there was the option for everyone to be able to remain anonymous, which was greatly appreciated by our members who participated, community members. And during these interviews, people were like we used words, or we were shared with them, with us, that it was a relief and truth and compassion and understanding that really described that space. So we knew that we were getting somewhere in accomplishing, collecting data for our research. We did overcome some challenges, like there is always in everyday things in life. If we did this project again, which we would really hope to expand it to furthermore other communities, as we did a small portion of members from 3 communities, I think it would be beneficial to broaden, to hear more stories. And that's the truth. And sharing the truth was very much our passion in obtaining to fulfill this research project that we did. We would plan our budget to account for the inflation. As we all know, the cost of living has been dramatically skyrocketing all over the north. Like the cost of travel and fuel and food rose significantly since preparing our budget, which is an even bigger problem in northern communities, as stated, where the cost of living is so much higher. There's also much greater interest in participating in the research. Like we had some people asking if we were still doing research or interviews, but we had already wrapped up. So there is interest for other northern members with lived experience to participate in surveys like this. Local organizations were very generous. They offered space for us to provide these opportunities of interviews. They donated some gift cards and door prizes for these functions that we conducted. This showed us how much of an impact our work was able to have on these communities. We see firsthand that our people and our neighboring friends and surrounding communities experience dire predicaments due to having no space to call home. We also know that addressing homelessness is supposed to be an urgent priority under the international human rights law and the federal government's own National Housing Strategy Act, but we see very little action, or at least some efforts, and it's an ongoing area that we would like to always, shine attention and light to for follow-ups and progression in that area. Here we have a little bit of feedback from some members that we did conduct interviews with. One individual who is struggling with homelessness and substance use has little support from his family and friends, and we know that is often the case. We don't always have our support systems to be strong as we would really like. They shared that it is hard for them to look for work because they're so cold at night and they're using their energy to stay alive. This survival-oriented lifestyle and worry is very common among people in the North. At the end of this conversation, the participant was grateful to have talked with us and shared his story. Somebody wanted to hear him. This person felt validated, felt heard. He stated that he was grateful when he does get a bed and that he feels sorry for some of his friends that may not have gotten a warm bed tonight. He hopes that they are alive in the morning. It is not easy living in the streets in the cold winter months, he had stated, so that we know our people are going to sleep with these heavy burdens of that worry. Am I going to wake up in the morning? We have a photo here of a shelter that sometimes people often reside in due to lack of housing. We found that a lot of people have expressed having little or having no support or no options for housing, which leads us to the big word, homelessness. They believe that overcrowding in shelters contributed to their losses of life because we don't have places to live. When residing in shelters, members who participated mentioned that they have lack of sleep is even inevitable. The sleep deprivation causes anxiety can lead to their depression. People questioned if they will make it through another day. And that worry often leads people to cope with their homelessness through substance use, just to make it another day, which was one of our very sad hearings from one of our participants. Transitional housing. In transitional housing, here I have feedback from those who resided in transitional housing. It was indicated by residents that they are not allowed to have family visit them. And in small rural communities, we all know family ties are very strong. So that was very hard for them to be denied access to family. Landlords, they have the power to decide who visits them. So there's that sense of feeling control there. We found that surfaced very much is having the restriction of families, and tenants also felt forced to do programming to obtain their accommodation. I'm sure these programming are beneficial, but everybody has a time and readiness that varies amongst one another, and some of them felt that they felt like pressured to do programming to obtain their spot in transitional housing, and they felt scrutinized. Um, they often wait for warmer temperatures to pitch a tent outdoors so that they can enjoy their privacy and freedom for those short months. So we see winter months are very challenging for our homeless population. Despite this, it was said that people felt controlled in transitional housing. On to discrimination. Our people who participated, when it came to signing documents and lease agreements, there was no legal or advocacy support or clarification with tenants when signing documents. A lot of our tenants and participants did not obtain a grade 12, or they were in the residential school system, so there was a lack of ability to comprehend a lot of the complex words in an agreement that is usually given to tenants. So they found that they had no advocacy to support that. It was also mentioned that the housing providers in the NWT exerted control over the lifestyle that tenants choose to live. A participant stated that when he entered the office of a housing provider to submit his application for housing, he was questioned about his completion of an addiction program. He was directed to show proof that he had completed the treatment program. Like, this is both inappropriate, it's a violation of discrimination and breach of confidentiality of our applicants. He felt very discouraged that his inability to better his lifestyle sabotaged his opportunity to secure housing. So he felt very, very violated and muted. We know that some community members cannot pay rent because of reasons directly tied to Canada's long and ongoing history of colonialism. A lot of housing and programs that are provided are also not culturally appropriate. They do not support the lifestyle of our Inuit and Arctic communities, which greatly differ from other communities across Canada. Um, oh, all these children. I love seeing this picture. I took them out sliding that afternoon. um, Arrears, eviction, and landlords. A high number of participants stated that it's very stressful to have rent payments amount overdue or outstanding. Example of arrears. It was identified that people feel fear on a day-to-day basis. This frame of mind often led to persuasive fear of being evicted with short notice. This worry also led to the fear of their children being apprehended by social services because of not being able to obtain secure home. Today, there are people still being evicted because they had not paid their power bill on time. And this is an example of a lack of supports to prevent eviction. Like, where do they go to? Our people in the Arctic are left with little to no support when it comes to funding opportunities. Um, like funding opportunities to alleviate arrears, even through external rental programs offered by housing providers in the NWT. When it comes to safety with housing, people do not want to talk about housing in the north, but they do want to feel safe. They want merely to be treated fairly and to feel comfortable in the place they call home. Um, One individual says, like, what safe housing means to her means not feeling watched. It means being able to feel comfortable in your own home, where your kids can play in the yard and not having to see drug dealers or bootlickers. So that's a different area, but that's always a factor with drug dealers and bootleggers, and that interfered with a lot of what safety means to those residing in public housing. When another individual stated that she was abused for years by her common law partner, and her home was damaged due to abuse she had endured. When she called the RCMP, her partner was arrested and charged. Her kids were taken away by the authorities, and she was evicted from her unit. And she felt that was her dead end. Basic infrastructure, services, and facilities. In small communities with no road access, living is very complex, as we all know. We live in a very cold climate. Some communities do not have trees for firewood and live in cabins at -45 with no other housing options. Often people resort to living in cabins that are built with plywood. If you don't have firewood, you must be or use heating fuel, which is very costly. So there's that cycle there. Um, People have no access to basic necessities like laundry. They have no electricity. Often there are health effects in these conditions, like breathing in stove fumes. Many people have no standard oven to cook, no washer and dryer for clean clothes. This makes life very challenging and leaves people with little or no hope for the future, not having those basic necessities. Health and habitability. Did I say that right? Habitability. It's like a tongue twister. um, People and their health are also affected by living in poor housing conditions. It's not rare to hear about or see mold or broken windows and doors and holes in the walls. Like, these kinds of living conditions can be dangerous. Exposed electrical wires, sharp areas exposed, like broken floor tiles, children with cuts on their feet. Mold would negatively affect people's health. You hear that often in small communities with older units. Um, Under international human rights law, dignity, equality, non-discrimination, and access to justice are the core and the right to adequate housing, as well as 7 components including 1. Legal security of tenure, 2. Availability of services, materials, facilities, and infrastructure, 3, affordability. 4, habitability. 5, accessibility. 6, location. 7, and cultural adequacy. There's a housing crisis in the NWT and Nunavut. We know it. It's nothing new. It's out there. It's aware. We know the challenges Northerners face. We must be the effort to work together and secure solutions. It's time to collaborate and work as partners to end homelessness in the North. With the right supports and the right amounts of funding, this can happen. There are people who lived and are living with experiences of homelessness and deeply inadequate housing who say, enough talking. It's time to see some action on what our government has been promising us for years. We are ready to create partnerships. We are ready to sit at the table for negotiations, and we are ready to help our people. Leaders and individuals are exhausted from these broken promises. Working together is crucial in creating adequate, culturally appropriate, and safe housing in the North. Safe and adequate housing is a human right, and everyone deserves housing. And that concludes us of the Stark Truth. Thank you all for tuning in and giving us this opportunity to share our findings with you all. It was a pleasure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I will now ask the member if they have any questions. Thank you. Members? Shauna? Ms. Morgan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you so much, Lisa, for taking the time both to talk to us today and for devoting so much of your time and your life to this work, which is, it's so important, especially in the way that you're doing it and try to build trust and relationships with people to understand better. I wanted to ask more about, you said you talked to people who were in transitional housing and they felt controlled or watched and that they were being forced into certain kinds of programming. I have a couple questions around this. I guess first, can you explain what kinds of programming people felt forced into? And I wondered if you had talked to the operator of the transitional housing program to understand, from their perspective, what might be happening there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Alikamik?
Yes, I'll try to answer as much as I can. This is where Janine will be very crucial because she conducted a lot of these interviews in Yellowknife and Inuvik and Ulukaktok as well. I do believe some of the programming indicated where they felt like they were forced into do. Of course, these programmings were very beneficial. Would be like AA programs, maybe wellness programs, basic wellness programs, things that would help to improve your mental health. As stated earlier, I believe that everyone has a time and a readiness that they feel individually. So when someone is forced to feel like they need to attend AA to obtain a spot in their transitional housing, it really tampers mentally on these individuals.
Okay. Ms. Morgan, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, thanks for that. We can definitely follow up because I agree that people need to enter into any kinds of programming in their own time and when they're ready and motivated to do that. But do you happen to know if, as part of your interviews, if you talked to the staff or the operators of these kinds of facilities?
No, we did not speak.
Yes, Ms. Alikamik? Yes, yeah, please proceed. Thank you.
I get used to this back and forth. No, we did not speak to any of the operators of these transitional units as we did conduct interviews merely to focus on members of lived experience and to furthermore if we had the opportunity to conduct another phase of these interviews, I would definitely have that as the top attendees to speak to for that Start Truth. We focused on those with lived experience and not those in positions of these programs with transitional housing.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any more questions? Ms. Morgan, do you have a follow-up? Okay, Ms. Morgan.
Yeah, thank you. I totally understand, there's always limits on your studies and how many interviews you can do. And I guess I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or insights on how to balance like safety and supports for participants with the freedom that people want to have to, be, free in their life to go where they want, have whoever they want visit. And, there's different kinds of housing, obviously, and some of the transitional housing programs like Housing First, people have their own apartments and, they might have a support worker come in once a week or something, but otherwise they're free to, manage their own apartment and do their thing. But some other facilities are more like supported living facilities where, an operator might run a building and someone has their own room and their own space within that, but there might be rules in the building attempting to try to help everyone live better together as a community and also keep everyone safe. So there might be rules about who can come and go or what times of the day or night people can have visitors or things like that, attempting to try to keep everyone safe. But I understand that also limits some of people's freedoms that they want to have. That by having the additional supports and security there, it limits people's freedoms. But I wondered if you had any insights on the best ways to balance those freedom with the security and supports in a facility that is, managed by, say, a nonprofit or an operator that's trying to support people in the living situation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Alikamik.
It's a tongue twister too, that one. Alikamik. Most certainly, we did some surveys in different places, and I totally think the programming is available and will be very beneficial to people living in transitional housing. Like very different. We did conduct interviews in shelters. I believe it was at Housing First in Yellowknife and the shelters both in Inuvik and Ulukaktok doesn't have a shelter. But I think the solution would to start implementing a safety for tenants in those areas for them to feel more secure is maybe having supports. I know a lot of times the populations of these people in transitional housing are indigenous people, and maybe having advocacy in there where they can approach and seek supports. And sometimes I think I felt from them, they felt almost intimidated to speak with them. So I really think connecting that barrier between those employees and the tenants living in those areas to really build that relationship with them, because if there's more fear of approaching the staff at these homes, transitional homes for people, that's another barrier right there, which can lead to a lot more other problems. So I think obtaining that safety would really be beneficial by making the connection with the tenants and the employees and creating that relationship where they feel safe to confide in them and, someone to advocate for them. They often feel intimidated when there's a non-Indigenous person there. So maybe employ more Indigenous peoples in these transitional housings that they can connect with. Indigenous people, they'll have a conversation if you've never seen them before and you put them in a room, they know each other instantly. It's just I'm going to say enriching and speak on my experience, but like I think I can say that safely for all Indigenous and more peoples too. So I think that would be my highlight for sure is creating those relationships with the employees and the tenants to open the door to feeling that safety overall.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll go to Mr. Nirsu.
Yeah, I'd like to thank you for your presentation. It was very informative. How was your research funded, and what's the time frame on it? Like, is it ongoing from year to year? And it'd be good to expand to other communities throughout the NWT to get other perspectives of how homelessness or housing is being addressed in other parts of the NWT. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Miss Alikamik.
Thank you. We did apply for some funding for this wonderful opportunity, and it was a one-time basis, like a pilot project thing that we secured funds from. I believe it was with Rural Development Network in partnership with the Hyuktit, I believe, or the Right to Housing Network. There you go. See, this is where Janine is really handy in this area because she took care of all of that. But it was in creating partnership with the Right to Housing Network where they help fund monies for us to conduct this interview and completion of the Stark Truths. We were very interested in conducting and going furthermore, and we'd love the opportunity to. And that goes with securing funding again to furthermore go in depth of the Stark Truth.
Okay, Mr. Nirsu, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just one final one. Thank you, Madam Chair. I've always stated that, housing is a universal crisis that we're enduring. Social problems play a big factor in it in all our northern communities because of isolation, lack of employment. In my community region, I'd like to see healthier communities and families. That's one of my top priorities is having a healthy community. You have a healthy community, you'll have better functioning organizations, and resource people are given more opportunities to stay with their families rather than dealing with these social problems. And giving people a chance at joining the workforce, because I believe every one of us have potential. Some of us are just hiding this potential we're not given a chance to show our potential. And also interaction with all community members, accepting each other for what kind of lifestyle we live, trying to better each other's living experiences. So what is probably one of the biggest factors that that's common throughout your visits in the three communities? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Ms. Alikamik.
Hi, thank you for that. Yes, definitely we see very common struggles in the communities that we did visit and the communities that we did not visit. It's very evident that those struggles are there. And I do believe that our people are very, very capable of accomplishing great things. And again, we do have struggles as Inuit peoples and Indigenous peoples. And I think the struggle for us coming into these communities was identifying who we are and creating that safety bubble that, we're not here to expose you. We created that confidentiality, and that was our number one priority. What we did want was vital is their lived experience. So I think that was our struggle into communities, identifying really who we are. And what made it key and successful is creating culturally appropriate ways. We're not going into communities and we're not saying, you'll get a gift card if you tell us this, you're going to tell us that, write this paper. We went in there with our hearts. We went in there valuing each and every one of them, everyone. And we too were one of them. We both have lived experiences of homelessness. And I think that was very vital in um, opening up and connecting with them and having them feel the same way too. In that, I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. I do have something too. I know that people that I've talked to, especially in my writing, people don't want to be homeless no more. I heard that from a lot of them, that we don't want to, we need a place to stay and everything. And then we know because of being homeless, they're, some of them, they have substance abuse issues, and, they have their own issues. So, and I know that some of them took their own initiative by doing something to help themselves by going to treatment. I know that there's quite a few that they did that, to deal with all the issues that, the unresolved issues. And some became homeless, and some, just like you said, children were apprehended. So they're doing something to help themselves to get their family back together. And I just wanted to know, have you heard from people, by doing the survey or talking to other people, have you heard from them wanting to, especially from people from small communities? Because we do have a transition program, and then there's rules and, there's policy in place where, there's a lot of restrictions. But have you heard from others where they're saying that, especially for people coming back from treatment program, that they would like to see more transitional program in small communities with program and services to help them deal with the issues and, the social issues, and want to live a healthy life? Because that's what I heard from a lot of my constituents, that they are tired of being homeless. They're tired of going to the warming shelters. We just wish that there were more for us to do. And some of them, they went for treatment, and they are, are going to go to treatment. And so I'm happy for them in that respect, so we're trying, but it's just that there's not enough transitional programs. So do you think that will help? Have you heard from people saying that we need more transitional housing or emergency housing or programs in small communities? Thank you.
Oh, yes, definitely. I have had feedback from those individuals. These interviews, the interviews probably took like maybe half an hour, maybe an hour max. But sometimes we're just sitting there and just talking about life in general. So we did have that conversation about, wants and needs and wishes and desires. And, our people are speaking. And I think by normalizing how it's okay to have a voice opposed to not speaking at all and hoping that something miracle will happen. I think a lot of it was I think it would start off more so by normalizing that homelessness is not normal. Definitely getting that out there. We did hear back how the struggle is real. I too attended a treatment program, and I was thrown into like a cage with all these other dogs. So like, not other dogs, but you know what I mean. Like, who's there? Because you are entered back into what you know and what swallowed you. But I think that really identifying supports in these small communities and everywhere in general will really help for direction in those who really want to live comfortably mentally, physically, emotionally. I do hear it how they offer on paper social services number, mental health worker contacts here. And I think small community programming is the right direction to go when it comes to mental health and helping support our people stand on their feet, give them like boost to socialize and do healthy living habits, interact with the community. So I think this small programming for small communities is very vital, and having the opportunities to connect with one another. So I definitely have heard that amongst our people in communities we did visit, and people in general, how they find that programming and healthy things to do in community is really vital in obtaining and staying on that path to wanting to be well and do well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Alikamik. Okay, Ms. Yakla, I have a question.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Alikamik, for your presentation and shining a light on the housing issue facing the Indigenous people in the North. All the things that you talked about in your presentation is real for people in the communities as well as here in Yelney. Looking at some of the pictures and the diagram, like the presentation itself, it must have been not easy for the two of you to go around, do these interviews and hear those stories, because it's people that have lived experience. And we know that growing up Indigenous, if you're living in the smaller communities, you know what it feels like to be going through this kind of what they're going through, the hopelessness, the isolation, the all the stuff I wrote on this little, unappreciated, undervalued, no connection, insecure, no work, can't go to school, can't be a contributing citizen, we don't feel safe, family breakup, no job. So all that kind of stuff that if you don't have a home, those are some of the things that you go through. But if you had a home, you can reverse all of that. So that's why it's so important for people to have a place to live. I have some of my constituents talk to me about, they grew up in a home and then their family broke up and now they have no home. They don't have a place to call home. They're living all over the place and really don't have they were taken away as young kids, separated from their family, and now don't have a place to call home. They can't even call the only place they could call home is to go back to their grandparents' place. So from this, from your presentation, I want to ask you, what would you say? What would you say is the solution for this housing crisis we're going through in the North? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Yakalaya. I'm filling in for our chair. Filling in for our chair. Surprise. Ms. Alikamik, you may respond. You're muted, Ms. Alikamik, if you can take yourself off mute.
There we go.
There we go. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Yes, it was definitely, like the questions we did have were definitely not easy. But then again, homelessness and anything around it is definitely not easy. And this is the first time I went without tears while doing the presentation, so I'm getting stronger. You know, a lot of these people are my people, you know, like my aunties and uncles, friends and family, someone you know, or your friends' family. So homelessness hits close every time, and it's never easy to see anyone going through that, let alone your immediate family. Um, your question is really broad. How would I find the solutions to it? There's so many avenues, but I think first and foremost is creating awareness and hearing from our people with lived experience. Feel heard, you know. It's one thing to be leaders and create change and be the voice, but I think it's more gold when we hear from the source, you know, and have that support our solutions in guiding us in the direction. And I really think programming in small communities is so vital. Awareness, you know, like we all are rooted from trauma. Identifying and having these educational opportunities that would allow individuals to explore their feelings, process their emotions, um, opportunities to learn basic life skills, budgeting skills, what's a healthy family, um, opportunities like that. And I think like sewing programs and drum making and, you know, spaces where people can come together and learn together and have those supports of coming together and learning, building that unity. And I think that would be my first thought in um, finding a solution to homelessness is from fighting from the root, is helping our people identify these traumas and then work your way up where they can become strong and mentally ready, where they can say, I'm not going to be homeless, and secure a home for them to keep living the lifestyle that they deserve and want to continue for their families, right?
Thank you. Ms. Yekalaya?
Thank you. That's very valuable information that the communities, and I hope people are from the communities are listening, because you are right. Asking the community, mostly it's asking the people in the community what they want, um, and you did put some of them on there. Programming in small communities are so vital. Education opportunities, awareness. When people don't know what they don't know, they won't ask. But until they're, because sometimes the people are just, it's hard to ask for help, you know? So even knowing that, to say, okay, I'm strong enough to ask for help now. If you don't know what you don't know, you won't know stuff. So, but bringing awareness to people helps them to decide to do something different. And so it's very valuable. And you did mention sewing, doing things in the community that the people are used to doing, like sewing, drum making. This brings connection to them, builds relationships, and also makes them feel valued so they can contribute something. So starting with those points makes it so well. And helping to, like you said, some people don't realize they're traumatized. You know, how do you, so finding out, like you said, helping to identify trauma, which is very good. So I want to thank you for your presentation, and very valuable. Must see.
Do you have a question? Okay. Mr. McNeely?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Lisa, it's a very good thing that you're sharing this research. And you had mentioned several communities that you went to visit. Have you got any plans to take your message to the other smaller communities in the Northwest Territories? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Alikamik.
We just wrapped up this interview with the Stark Truths last year. We definitely are interested in conducting more in our research with further findings pending funding to do so. I don't think this is the ending. I think this pilot project was a real indicator that people want to be heard. And when they see one of their own out there conducting these interviews, doing research, sharing with wonderful leaders like you all, I think that really gives us that determination and inspires others to do the same. So I definitely would find us seeking to do opportunities to share our story and continue other phases in this area as well.
Thank you. Mr. McNeely, anything further?
Yes, thank you, Lisa, again. I'm glad that you're looking at taking that message to other communities to broaden the awareness and need for better housing. Recently, over the last several years, there's been a lot of emphasis federally on the need for housing, and therefore a lot of Indigenous funding have come to the Northwest Territories, and I think there's still interest to pursue and apply for more. So recognizing that the impoverished level will encourage the decision makers or the leaders of our region to really focus on your message and how to best address it with a designed housing plan for the respective community. So I just share that encouragement with you there, Lisa. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McNeely. Noting the time and that we have some business to get done as a committee, I will thank you for being with us today, Ms. Alikamik, and allow you to provide any closing comments you may have.
Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted. You're good to go.
Okay. No, again, I just want to thank you for this opportunity and reaching out and finding us to share this with you. And I hope to be here again with another segment of this wonderful research that we have been able to do and will continue to do, and be a voice and really be heard, having the opportunity to be heard. So that's really gold, and I really like that and appreciate your time, and thank you all for showing up today.
Thank you, Ms. Alikamik, and on behalf of the committee, thank you for the research you've done and sharing it with committee. It really means a lot when it's research from Northerners by Northerners, especially reflecting the realities of smaller rural and remote communities. So thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing from you again soon. And with that, this concludes today's public hearing on housing as a human right, and we will close our public proceedings. Thank you very much again.